we can make a start. So
Yes.
it's 6 o'clock and we have an hour. So I'm conscious of time and I'm pretty sure there will be also some questions coming. So today's session is really special because I welcome this topic today coming also from Enviroflex who have joined us in this session today. So we welcome Felicia Richardson and Mark Spedden. Is that
Spadden, close, very, very close. Mick Spadden.
Okay, very close. I got it nearly.
That's fine.
You will have time to introduce yourself as well. I'm really grateful for you both joining us tonight in this session because I think insulation and in particular the way, like thinking, for example, around retrofitting and the opportunities behind that is such a big topic actually to discuss. And we, like even today, we had a session, Simona and I, where we talked about the rising costs to new builds. And while NCC has picked up on more energy efficient homes, which is very welcomed, but we have 8 million homes and we can actually look at retrofitting them to create really climate ready buildings. And that creates incredible opportunities actually to create comfortable homes and low costs. So I welcome everyone who has joined today. And in particular, we have a special guest, Prudence, who will be also sharing her renovation story and how it transformed actually her place into a comfortable home. So before we jump in, I just want to also do acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, Evitat acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. We are in particular here to listen, learn, and build a future together. Felicia, I give you a few minutes to introduce yourself, and the same also for Mark. I really want to welcome you both today, and really happy to have you on today here because I think insulation and the install and the service quality is often enough tied very closely together. And when we are talking about insulating better our homes, the outcomes actually of that work is often tightly connected and embedded in the service quality. I had many talks with Felicia over the months, and I'm also really...
You mean I'm beating you up over months and years, Sonia, talking about insulation, right? This is what you mean.
Look, I've been on the renovation journey myself, and purely due to frustration, actually, how to choose, who to trust even in that space, we started Evitat. So, and I'm really grateful actually for Enviroflex to be one of an early member to joining Evitat, because it's all about building that trust and transparency into the market and really make conscious choices when you're looking for the right company actually to choose. And yeah, and I think, Felicia, yes, we had so many conversations around, like deep conversations also, how Enviroflex operates, what's the difference in the market. And in the end, insulation doesn't cost the world. I think it's such a,
Insulation and draft proofing, it's the low-hanging fruit, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of if you are on your retrofit journey, insulation and draft proofing low-hanging fruit, cheapest thing that you can possibly do to increase the energy efficiency of your home.
Absolutely.
And if you don't mind me kind of hijacking it from
That's
here,
fine.
So I took over Enviroflex about 5 years ago. And, back then insulation companies were very, very focused on new builds kind of thing, because the market was tangible. You could actually see how many new building approvals were coming through, all of that kind of stuff. And the way that it worked, it wasn't viewed as a skill. It was basically viewed as a non-skilled trade. And everyone was casual. They were all piece rate workers. So now back then, and we're only talking five odd years ago, we're talking about $1.20 a square meter to do a wrap on a home. Now, those people, they weren't given tools of trade. They weren't given cars. They weren't given petrol. They weren't given anything like that. So as a result, you can imagine that people had to do approximately, and that was a team, right? That wasn't one guy. That was a team. That was a team of two. So you had to do 6 homes a day to basically make not even not a fabulous living wage, kind of thing. It was really tough yards kind of thing. Anyway, so I came to Enviroflex to do some analysis over a couple of things. And one of the things that I saw was the market in the retrofit. And because basically from before 2002, insulation wasn't mandatory to a home. It wasn't demanded. And in Australia, one of the things is that we like our homes cheap and quick, right? So you imagine that there's insulation in your home. The reality is that there probably is. If it was built before 2002, there probably wasn't. If it was built before, say, 2018, quite frankly, it's probably at a substandard to what the NCC would now describe as mandatory. So the retrofit market in Australia is enormous. And, but to meet that market and to actually do it well, what we decided to do was to build and professionalize an industry, to create, in the absence of there being a trade structure around it, we decided to go out and create one. And, and I'm a big Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of gal. And the first thing that you do is people who feel secure, feel valued, and therefore they do a better job. So all of our guys are permanently employed. And so often we have people say, well, why is that important? Why it's important is because our guys don't need to do 6 jobs a day. When they come in and they retrofit your home, they are actually looking at doing 1 job a day and doing it really well. And that is really, really key. So they cut in around all your services, and they do all of the things that are required to give you a fantastic thermal envelope. And it is a really different market. And this is what we saw. And, look, to me, this is the low-hanging fruit. I couldn't understand for the life of me. And I wrote my manifesto. If anyone's interested in it, please reach out. I actually wrote it to the CFMEU at the time, to my organizer at the CFMEU. And what I talked about was, if the government was to bring about a rebate scheme, what they needed to do was to divide it into a couple of ways. They needed to support product and go and decide whether they were going to support Australian manufacturing versus non-Australian manufacturing. They needed to decide whether they were going to support employment security versus just casual workers. And and it was really something that still sticks with me now, and it's still really relevant, although a little bit dated, pre-COVID. Very, very relevant nonetheless. So, so the Enviroflex model was born. We are a professional services team, and and look, at anyone who wants to see what that looks like, I encourage you to jump on and have a look at the reviews all over the place, be it Google, be it on My Electric Efficient Home and Facebook and all those kind of things, and have a look at my team. They're bloody awesome.
Exactly. So I know also, Felicia, you've been, or Enviroflex has been also, I think, advising, for example, the state government on
Oh,
certain
yeah.
quality standards. And I think that's also
Yeah,
worth
thank you.
mentioning, like
Thank
I
you for the
guess,
prompt.
a lot
So,
of people still
sorry, do you
remember
want me to
even.
talk about that? Do you
Yeah,
want me to
like,
talk
or
about
maybe
Sorry.
just let me quickly do a quick introduction also of Simona, and then I officially hand over and you can dive in.
Sorry, Simone.
So, good. We have, of course, Simona here as well as our great advocate for Evitat, but also Simona is a passive house expert and has shared many, many amazing stories of her practice and experience over 20 years, I think, working in that space and educating people. So Simona will be hosting and taking us through the questions, and it's a very interactive session. So please feel free also to ask questions, and we are more than happy to feed them into the conversation, and yeah, and share actually any insights or maybe specifics you might have come across. And I'm pretty sure Mark and Felicia will be more than happy to answer anything which might come up. So, Felicia, I hand it officially to you. Yes, and please share
Sorry.
that.
So going back to my manifesto, firstly, I mean, one of the big things was I couldn't understand the focus on the government in terms of renewable energies, when what to me seemed to be the no-brainer was that we should actually be reducing our consumption prior to actually renewing. And that to me was an absolute no-brainer. And in that, draft proofing first. So I'm not even selling my own product here. Draft proofing first. Draft proofing, insulation. And then we start looking at how we use the appliances that we have and things like that. And then we look at the renewables, because you'll need so much fewer, right? So much fewer. And one of the things that we're certainly seeing at the moment is the government reducing solar rebates, for example, as they're trying to change, because they can't accept a lot of what's going into the grid at different times of the day. So just interesting. But so going back to it, so you mentioned it, because of the work that we've done, I had people from DELP, both in Victoria and New South Wales, reach out to me. I had the Energy Efficiency Council reach out to me, the Clean Energy Council at the time, ask me about what I thought the market was, how we were doing it, what was the Enviroflex difference. And we went around and we sized it, and what the Energy Efficiency Council was promoted to do under the guidance of Insulation Australasia and ICANS, which is the manufacturing industry body for Australia and New Zealand, was to come up with a roadmap and to set a standard in insulation practices. And as a result, they've come up with a certification process and training, and and that basically ensures that you're getting a quality retrofit, basically. So look, there's all of these little things on the way. You touched on Sonia, and I'm gonna shout out, toot our horn just a little bit. While the governments have been really reluctant to do too much in the retrofit space, Enviroflex have been the only person who've been doing the Victorian government's retrofit work for the last couple of years, or last few years. So we do all their social housing work in terms of retrofit, so not new build, but retrofit. And look, we run an awesome crew, and I couldn't be prouder of them.
That's perfect. Yeah. So Simona, I think you can make a start with the question.
But maybe if I can say something, I'm so excited to have you here, because this is one of kind of my pet hates here in Australia as well. And, you know, nothing against volume builders or insulation installer. But when I came in 2007, I just thought, you know, insulation company, they will know what they're doing. But back then, when we renovated in 2010, I just had the insulation company do the insulation. And when I got back, I couldn't believe my eyes. There were gaps just everywhere around the windows. There were gaps that big, you know, like massive, just everywhere. And luckily, my partner and I knew, so we spent a whole day fixing their gaps. But that was kind of for me a bit of an eye-opener that, you know, even insulation specialists, so-called specialists, don't know what they're doing. And what I typically recommend to people, because, you know, not everyone can afford whatever, a builder that's specialized in high performance or, you know, that care about. But I typically say, you know, if you have to go with a volume builder, or if you have to go with a builder who doesn't know, get a specialist third party, you know, someone like you that oversees the insulation, because A, the builder is held accountable, and B, you have a real specialist that does it, but you can't rely on so-called insulation installers that just,
So one of the biggest issues in this, right, is that there is no check after your insulation is done. Now the world is evolving, right? The world is evolving. But, you know, what has typically happened in a new build scenario is that people, often the plasterers will do the insulation, and they will do it for free so that they can win the plastering work.
Yeah.
And that is kind of just what happens. And all that's required from a building tick-off kind of thing, and it's all changing with the NCCs and it's all tightening up. But basically, you all you need is your insulation certificate to get your certificate of occupancy.
Yeah.
And
even
that's
and
done.
I think I have
Nobody's checking whether it's there.
Yeah, so I think I might have shared the story before. One of my best friends, she was building a house, and she's you know, single, so she had to go with a volume builder. And I had given her some tips before, you know, what to look out for. And for instance, after the windows were installed, she went around with her dad and you know, spray foam around the windows to install them, you know, insulate them properly. But then anyway, she moved into the house and she was wondering, why is it so freaking cold in winter and so hot in summer? You know, she did put in a bit more insulation in the roof and everything. And then half a year later, suddenly she figured out, oh, they forgot to install the exhaust fan in the laundry. So they called someone to install the exhaust fan. And when they were up in the roof, they suddenly called her, come and have a look. So actually, all the insulation was still wrapped up lying in the roof. No one had even bothered to install it. And I just thought, how can this happen? Why is not there one person that's actually checking if it's installed or not? It's just beyond me.
Simone, this is not unusual at all, and I hate to say it, it is not unusual at all. Once again, you got to incentivize the behavior that you want to see as someone who runs a business. And the reality is, if you're paying someone and they need to go and install 6 houses a day to put food on the table for their family, you know, you're not getting a great job, right? And we come across, often our team will go along to homes and stick their heads up, and there's bags of bats in the roof. Or conversely, there might just be insulation around the manhole. Because believe it or not, one of the old tests used to be, right? One of the old tests used to be, they would grab a pebble and they would throw it through the manhole, and if you couldn't hear it land, it hit insulation, was the view. Or you know, if you hear it hit something hard, it obviously hit plaster and there was no insulation up there.
Oh my God.
And I know that it sounds so base, right? But from a European perspective, right? And obviously, Simone, you're European. You know, the amount of people who ring us and say, I've never been so cold in my life as I am in Australia.
Felicia, can I just ask maybe, because Simona, you mentioned, you know, gaps, for example, and of course we talked in many sessions around gaps of insulation and what that means. But let's say, you know, you can't, even if you do it yourself, you might not be able to reach or have actually the knowledge what to look for. but it's quite significant in terms of the efficiency of insulation. So here's my question to Felicia or Mark, even, what are actually or what's the influence actually in terms of gaps versus efficiency of insulation?
I'm gonna hand it over to Mark in a minute, but I'm gonna say something that a guy from insulation company manufacturer said to me years ago. And it was basically that heat wants to make everything the same temperature as it. So it will chase the gap to the cold, to actually be it internal or external, to try and make it the same heat. So that gives you an idea of the fluidity. So if you don't have a secure thermal envelope, that's basically what happens. And going once again back to it, and Mark will nail this far better than I could, but when you're going into a ceiling, and for those of you who jump on and you're looking at different installation videos and things, and indeed we do them, but typically what you see is an open cavity. The roofs that we go into are very, very rarely that. They're typically, the guys are working around ducts, they're working around potentially the old hot water services that used to be put into ceilings and things like that, and actually trying to still then create a thermal envelope for you. So where, for example, you have ducts and we can't, say, for example, you've asked for an R6 kind of thing, and where we can't get an R6 back under there, they could potentially be trying to put in for you an R25 just to still create that thermal envelope and and seal that in the best way that they possibly can. And but anyway, Mark, I'm boring. I'm handing it over.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah, so look, Felicia probably covered it probably the best way possible. So depending on where you look at on the internet, and the research that I've done, and the energy people vastly more educated than I have found that anywhere of about 5% of gaps in your insulation envelope can lead to about up to a 50% reduction in the performance. So from my understanding is, as Felicia pointed out, the laws of thermodynamics, obviously heat wants to spread out everywhere equally as much as possible, going from a high state to a low state. The better that I like to think of each surface of a room or your house as essentially a separate envelope. And the more completeness of you got in terms of what we would call the total R value. So the R value, not only any insulation, but all the other building materials that might be involved. So things like your plaster, things like your timber frame, it could be the exterior cladding, reflective foil wraps, things like that. When you're talking about that total R value, the overall R value is going to have that impact across the entire surface. So I won't go too much into it because at the end of the day, I'm not an energy efficiency expert. They could probably explain this vastly better than I can. But trying to avoid those gaps where possible. One of the biggest actually gaps that people don't really think about actually is your windows. So windows are a huge gap in your walls, even when you end up double glazing them or triple glazing them, particularly because double glazing and triple glazing is great in summer because it's great at preventing convection heat from escaping, but it's not so good at preventing infrared heat from coming into your house and still heating up your house, which you've just upgraded with insulation, which will stop the heat from escaping where it used to be. We've done that a couple of times where people have come back to us and said, my house is actually warmer in summer than I thought, and unfortunately probably didn't quite take into account shading, north facing windows and things like that. So in general, yeah, a good rule of thumb, 5% of gaps equals a 50% reduction in what you're spending, and especially if you're spending a few $1,000s potentially on insulation. Do you want to risk that sort of thing? There is best practice. But having said that, though, one thing I probably would say just to set everybody's expectations, because it's retrofit, it's not designing from the start. So it's a bit of a if you're building, let's say, a passive house style dwelling from the get-go, it's going to be a lot easier to complete that envelope insulatively than it will be to retrofit, because, for example, the timber frame that's in your walls is a thermal bridge, and your thermal performance of the timber at 90 mil studs is not going to be the same as the 2.5 wall bat you've put in right next to it. So there's always those limitations. But having said that, it's the best thing you can do is just to have that completeness of coverage overall where possible, if the building material fundamentally allows as well. So yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that we should just touch on too, though, is ensuring that you have circulation of air within your roof space. So, you know, Mark, and you can speak to that a little bit, because I know the standards differ depending on the building codes around the world. But certainly, you know, what you want air circulation within your roof space. So we insulate to the top plate. You know, if you're doing a DIY, for example, you know, you can't have your bats touching the roof. You know, to have full coverage through to your tiles is not what you want.
Yeah. And that goes to what's available. Some things like your roof pitch, for example, is going to impact that, as Felicia just said. So putting an R4 bat in a roof pitch of only 15 or so degrees, it's going to be very, very hard to cover with an R4 bat to the very, very edge of you're supposed to be able to cover 50 millimeters of the top plate of the outside of your dwelling. So trying to be compliant with this relevant Australian standard. So things like that. So there is a bit of trick to it. But having said that too, 50% of something's better than 100% of nothing. So there's also that argument you can use as well. But if you're going to spend, at the end of the day, if you're going to spend your hard-earned money on getting it done, get it done properly. That's all I can recommend, really. So, and I know that we've hijacked a little bit here, but just to kind of close that a little bit, you know, the studies that were done, we worked on the program Healthy Homes with the Victorian government, doing insulation and draft proofing. And, you know, people all want to know, you know, what is the reduction in my energy bills? And the reality is often it's not linear, is the thing, right? Because what happens is people change their behavior. And in particular, when you're looking at people who are not of, who are careful with how they spend their money, basically you don't turn on, and I used to not do it too. So at my farm, you know, we wouldn't turn on the air conditioning because it would just dissipate. It'd dissipate in 2 seconds. So there was no point in doing it. So what we find is that people who've had insulation done, they actually can then better climate control. So the insulation bills don't necessarily go down, but what they find is they can turn on their heating and cooling units for an hour and actually hold that within their house. Now, the bigger thing that actually came out of it was the level of comfort. Now, comfort's all a relative thing, and it seems like a bit of a nice thing to talk about. But what that actually translated in terms of medical expenses and medical wellness was every person in every home that was installed had an average of $860 reduction in medical expenses, which is amazing and just quite huge. So, you know, and that report's available on Sustainability Victoria. So please go check it out. So it's not just a nice to have. It's not just a carbon emissions thing. It's actually really a wellness thing as well.
No, that's amazing. I think maybe now we went quite into the detail now, but maybe if we even go one step back and, you know, Mark and Felicia, if you could quickly run through, you know, what are actually the basic benefits of insulation? And, you know, you mentioned already, you know, the health benefit, but, you know, let's talk about comfort, efficiency, low energy in your fabric first approach. You know, what are actually the benefits? You know, why should you insulate?
Well, it's pretty straightforward, really. It's from the way I like to think of it, it's about controlling the climate in your own home. And the more easily, I think of it as like, I don't know if anybody's familiar with a sine wave graph. So you'll have a peak and a trough and a valley. If you think of that as the maximum temperature inside your home can reach in the year versus the minimum, you want to bring that as closer together as possible. And by doing that, you don't need as many days, for example, to turn on your active management systems, which is your heating and your cooling. So from an energy efficiency perspective, that's your number one purpose, right? You don't want to spend as much money on very, very high electric bills and et cetera, or gas bills or whatever it might be. So that's the main thing. And the good thing about insulation too is it's because it's passive. It just sits there. It doesn't annoy anybody. It's just quiet. Don't have to turn it on. Don't have to turn it off. And if you've got that peace of mind as well of getting it installed by correctly, let's say, that's where it sort of sits for me. I think that's the easiest way I can probably put it for the benefit. And as Felicia said, there has been health benefits as well by not having those differences in temperature. The likelihood of you developing certain conditions, making the house more comfortable as a retreat from, well, especially with global warming and all the rest of it that we're experiencing now. Not so much this summer. It's been a bit mild this summer, but that's okay. I'm sure next summer it'll be even worse. So from that perspective, that's where it's going to provide the most benefit. It's just going to give you a better comfort all year round, essentially. So that's the way I look at it, Sonia. That's Simone, sorry.
And I guess that's the big thing with thermal comfort. What I guess most Australians, they know the feeling, that you have the heater cranking on full speed, you have the hot air, the split system, whatever, flowing in your face, but it still feels cold, no matter how much the heater is on, it still just feels chilly. Yeah. And the problem with that is the drafts we have in our home. Because no matter how warm your air is, if you have gaps in your insulation, if you have gaps around your windows, or if you have single glazed windows, there would always be a cold draft coming in, and you can't feel comfortable. You still sit there with your aquas and your beanie or whatnot. And like you said, Felicia, as well, most Europeans, they say, "Oh, I've never been as cold in my life." And I think that the funny thing with thermal comfort is you can't. It's a bit hard to describe. You can't capture it on pictures. You can't see it or show it to people. You have to experience it. And what I often find is that someone who has never experienced thermal comfort, they just stick with their really uncomfortable, drafty cold homes. They just accept what it is. They might complain like crazy, and there are often those kind of two groups of people, either the one that sit in the cold with their beanie and their Ugg boots and the jacket and work, at their laptop and have the gloves on, because they don't want to turn on the heater. And then you have the others that have the heater cranking all the time, and they spend an absolute fortune on their heating bills. But often those people, that they don't think there is a solution. But like you said, Felicia, it's such a low-hanging fruit. Insulating your home is not as expensive as many people think. And actually, you have it paid off really quickly. But the biggest thing is the thermal comfort, that you don't freeze in your house, that you just can, feel comfortable. It's such a, yeah.
So I really, Simone, and I mean this in the nicest way, but I swear occasionally, and Sonia, I apologize if I do, but one of the things that gives me the pip, quite frankly, is the whole. If you replace your air conditioning units, your split system units, and I'm looking at mine as I say it, all I'm doing without insulation is effectively heating the external environment in a more efficient way. Yeah. That's all I'm doing, right?
Yeah,
holding it in. I'm not holding it in. It might feel like it's working well, and it might feel like it's working harder, but I'm not holding it in. And and it might be a little bit cheaper, but it's basically it's not solving the problem.
And Felicia, you're absolutely right, because a lot of the homes here are so substandard, which basically means when you turn on your heater, or actually they have air conditioning to cool the room without insulation, you are within minutes. It just depends on the thickness of walls and the materials surroundings. You're basically putting that out. You could also sit in the garden and do the same thing. And it has maybe just a little bit of layer. So this is the whole conversation around Australia having these glorified tents. And often enough, the building quality is very close to that. And that's exactly the scenario. If we would actually have a thermal heat camera, a lot of these homes glow in winter through the camera view, because all the heat basically goes straight through the materials and straight actually out. And that's exactly what Felicia just mentioned. It doesn't allow actually to contain that added energy for heating or cooling it immediately spreads out and is gone. Yeah. So you're basically more heating and cooling your outside environment than anything else, or a large proportion of the costs and the effort of heating and cooling goes into that. And only a small percentage actually creates the feeling of, comfort or being warm, or actually in summertime, actually like comfortable, in terms of the temperatures inside. So it's a really important part to understand as well. And these are the basics really around insulation, where we can bring in a lot of efficiency without even having in the first place maybe to turn on an air conditioner. No?
Yeah.
One of the big things that speaks to me though is insulation is something that you can't see. So every person, alluded to it before, every person who buys a home, particularly in Melbourne, but I'm sure many other states as well, you pay a mozza for a house, right? You really do. And so you have an expectation that you have insulation. And all I can say to you all is stick your head up in your roof and check it out. And I'm only talking about your roof. I'm not even talking about your walls and everything else. So, and Enviroflex is one of the few companies that actually do retrofit cavity walls in Australia without removing the plaster. And so that is also really key. But it's also, people like what they can see, and they can't see insulation. So if I'm going to do something, oh, hang on, I'm going to get solar because I can see it. No, I can see that it's doing great, right? And insulation, unfortunately, you feel it on the day that it's done, and then you probably don't feel it afterwards. Or hopefully you don't. That's the idea, right? Is that it changes your life and it passively changes your life.
It becomes the new normal.
It becomes the new normal. And the only thing I can say to people who are looking at doing new builds, and obviously that's not the market that I move in, is over insulate. And people who come to us to retrofit, please don't do the bare minimum, because the climate is changing. And if you do it well, you'll do it once. That'll be it. That's it.
Right.
And and look at it that way. It's an investment in your family's comfort for a lifetime. And there's very little cost difference in it.
And that brings also the question, Felicia or Mark, to answer. So what's the average actually insulation lasts once it's installed? So you can answer.
I'll take this one, Felicia. All right.
Yeah.
So generally, the good rule of thumb is to check your insulation roughly every 10 years. Insulation does break down, in certain cases does break down over time. Glass wool, for example, can maybe last 10 to 15 years with its requisite R value. You've obviously got polyester. You've also got different types of spray foam and things like that. They've all got different lasting capacities. They've all got their pros and cons as well. It really sort of depends as well. The other things obviously to take into account is the other things to take into account is, first and foremost, what you're going to be your return on investment, what your budget's going to be, and those sorts of things are going to determine what is going to be the best solution overall for you for your home. I mean, 10 years is a long time too. That's quite a good investment anyway. I mean, it's if you think about a payoff period, if you're going to spend $2,000-3,000, let's say on your ceiling, over a 10-year period, that will save you an X amount in your electric bills, your gas bills, whatever it might be. That's the way to think of it. But as I said, unless you don't want to go into the nitty-gritty, unless you really want to go into the nitty-gritty of what type of materials are available, there's plenty of different types. But I always say to customers that I talk to and things like that it's really depending on their budget and what kind of return that they want over that let's say 10-year period or a 20-year period. Are you going to be in that home in 30 years? Because once you're out of that home, that insulation's someone else's problem, not your problem, if that makes sense. So there's all those things you've got to weigh up based upon what your current situation is, and that's why we have our guys go out and try and tailor our solution provision to based upon the dwelling itself, because obviously got different cladding involved, you've got different roof sizes, different roof pitches, different existing insulation or non-existent insulation, et cetera, et cetera. So it sort of really depends on the house.
Can I just add, before anyone freaks out kind of thing, what Mark is talking about is the loft, and the loft in any insulation, be it cellulose, be it batt, be it glass wool, be it polyester, be it whatever, will actually start to compress over time. So while a lot of, in particular, the batts, for example, are guaranteed for 35 years, you know, the issue is that they do actually start to compress. And yeah, so they're still going to be there before we get questions asking about this. They're still going to be there, and they're still valuable. And it's really, really interesting, because even cellulose, you know, we would actually recommend, if you have cellulose in your roof, cellulose is the biggest insulator used in Europe. You know, glass wool is nowhere near as big as cellulose is. So we would say to you, unless it's damaged, we leave it there and we go in over the top of it, because it's still doing something. So yeah, anyway, so that's just something to think about. But sorry, I just wanted to add that, Mark.
No, absolutely. No, you make a very good point, Felicia.
Our manufacturing partners reached out to us and went, hang on.
No, it's you know, make a very good point. But look, the best thing to do at the end of the day is every 10 years or so, if you're moving into a new dwelling or whatever it might be, just check your insulation out, particularly the ceiling. That's the easiest one to check. It's the easiest one to upgrade or fix. It's visible. That's where you probably generally start anyway. So yeah.
I agree with Mark. It's a really important message as well, because like your roof insulation, ceiling, you know, that's the number one entrance for heat or even cold, which comes from the outside and enters basically the building. So in particular, heat gains are massive. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Sonia, once again, though, it's the unexpected thing. You know, a dear mate of mine from school, you know, and that was a little while ago. But his mother, just, you know, in her retirement, has moved into a penthouse in Toorak. You know, it's not an old building. And she, so for those of you who are coming from around Australia, Toorak's a really salubrious kind of place in Victoria. And her house had her apartment had no insulation at all. And so it's not just poor builds that actually don't have it. It's actually right across the board. And, you know, so going back to what Mark said, you know, it might not be your comfort zone, but stick your head up on your roof and have a look. But the other thing is, you actually probably won't recognize what it is. And you might just have an R25, for example, whereas we'd be suggesting to you to put in an R6. So, or get to an R6. So, you know, please get someone in who knows what they're doing to have a look at it. Doesn't need to be us, but get someone in who knows what they're doing.
So, and one thing, because we're getting quite detailed here, but we've been talking already for quite a while, and I'm conscious we have Prudence here with us as well. Yes. You know, a bit of a homeowner. And, you know, and before, maybe let's get her in, you know, her point of view in, and then, you know, at least she's free to go. And this is a bit of a magical, you know, of a nice story, because, you know, how actually insulation can improve your life. And so, Prudence, if you could tell us a bit about your place, you know, how long have you been there? And what was it like before you, you know, started looking at insulation?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. I live in a house that was built in 1950, just after the war. So after the war, they had very little to build with. They had to do the absolute best that they have. And my house has been beautifully built. It's very small. It's 2-bedroom weatherboard, and I live in Hyatt. When I came here, it was in a very, very shabby condition. Now it's not. I had insulation put in at the time, and that's going back 35 years I've been here. It was shredded newspaper that was put in at the time. It was blown in through the tiles on the roof. When it came time to have new insulation, I thought, I'm only going to do this the once. I'm 70, so I don't want to spend any more money than I have to, because I'm not going to be here a long, long time. So I'm only going to do it once, and I'm going to do it right. So I got a couple of quotes, one from Evitat and one from another man. And another man said to me, oh, no, you'll have to have everything removed out of that ceiling. Oh, no, you'll have rats and you'll have mold and all those. Oh, no, it's got to be disinfected. And I thought, this guy's given me a snow job. I don't have a great deal of expertise, but I know if I had rats and I had mold, I'd know about it. So anyway, I contacted Enviroflex. I spoke with their office staff. They could not have been more professional, more courteous, and absolutely brilliant. I sent them a plan of my house, and there's the man. There is the man, one of the men, in my bathroom. And I let Nikki know that access was in my bathroom. It was above the toilet because I'd had the toilet moved in 35 years ago. So it was a difficult spot. She said, okay, show me the picture, show me where we're going, see what we can do. She came back, she gave me the quote, and she said to me, you can have the baby, you can have the middle, or you can have the Rolls Royce. I said, I'm going to do this once, I'll have the Rolls Royce. So I got the R6, the top of the line. The men came early in the morning. I think there were 4, there might have been 5, I'm not sure. I showed them the space. They said, no problem whatsoever. I have not had one, I don't think I've ever had a group of men in my home who were more efficient, pleasant, polite, did a very, very neat job, cleaned up, and I was thrilled to bits. I wrote to Enviroflex to tell them how pleased I was. I also contacted you not very long ago to let you know that during the summer, yes, I agree, we have not had a hot summer. During the summer, I have put my air conditioner on twice. Apart from last weekend, which Saturday and Sunday were definitely hot days, I cannot tell you at this stage about any alteration in my electricity bills. If we were doing this same panel in 12 months' time, I could be able to tell you better, because it was August of last year and it's just too soon for me to give you a honest evaluation of the accounts. Overall, I could say I could not fault in any way, shape or form the work that was done, and the service I have received from the office staff has been exemplary. So I'm, as I say, I've been here for 35 years, and the man who came earlier to tell me, oh no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do something else. And when I spoke to Enviroflex and let them know, they said that is nonsense. And I felt it was nonsense as well. So I cannot fault them whatsoever. So that's all I need to let you know.
Perfect. So I imagine that other guy just wanted to suck it all out, send you a huge bill just to suck it all out and, you know, make some extra money on you.
Well, he told me I needed disinfecting and I needed all it taken away, and I'd have rats and I'd have mold. And I knew, I mean, my house is very neat and clean and tidy. And I knew that if I had mold, I'd smell it.
And you know, prudence in fairness,
when the men went up in the ceiling,
it's funny, we have sometimes we do go in and we do have mold. So I'm so grateful that you're saying this, because sometimes we do go in and we say to people who don't know that they have mold, we say to them, our guys get up there and they say there is mold, or underfloor in particular, and we say there is mold. And you know, and it is a really it's a big health issue. So I can promise you, if there'd been mold, my boys, they would have been all over it. Or my team.
Well,
sorry, they're not my boys.
When they went up into the ceiling, they were very, very careful. As I say, it was a difficult access for them. The bathroom is small, but they had no problem whatsoever. And they said, no issue in your ceiling whatsoever. None. And I had already had a couple of years prior, I had the house rewired. Therefore, I was able to send you a certificate of compliance from the electricians. You were very happy with that certificate and accepted that. And as far as I'm concerned, you couldn't be faulted.
That's beautiful. And it's great to hear the actual difference it's making in your house, that you can actually feel so much better, so much, more comfortable. That's amazing.
Yes, I can, but it would not be 100% without doing a full 12 months. And as I said, it was August of last year. So if we did the same panel in 12 months' time, I could give you a better understanding. But I've been very...
Sonia, there you go. Sonia, you're up.
I'm officially actually inviting you this year in August to do another session and share the experience, what it means actually in terms of costs. But even, what Simona even mentioned. Sorry?
It'll be different. Prudence, you will have had a winter then as well, and that will be completely different. And I'm hoping that you'll have a beautiful experience.
I certainly look forward to catching up with you again in 12 months' time.
That would be brilliant.
Sounds great.
We tapped actually on these tricky situation and circumstances. Prudence, you didn't had actually any issues in terms of mold or anything. Felicia and Mark, they are far more critical scenarios you come across, in terms of mold. A lot of people are not aware that it's actually happening, under the house or even rooftop, depending actually where moisture get trapped. And so share a little bit what it means actually in terms of having staff who can identify that easily, and how do you tackle these situations?
Yeah.
So,
sorry.
Mark, can I do the fluffy?
Yeah,
Can I do the
for it.
fluffy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you go into the thing. So basically, look, mold is significantly detrimental to your health. So if you have mold in your home or underneath your home and it permeates up, the impact on your family's health is enormous. But we typically don't know. And particularly in Victoria in the last year, we've come across so much mold when we've gone in to do underfloor insulation. And I've got to tell you, it gives us no joy to call out mold, because our team who've gone out there and who we've assigned a job to be income earning, we're now walking away from that job and saying, I'm sorry, we can't do it until the mold gets treated. But it needs to be done. It needs to be done for your health, basically. Now,
and that's a critical step, because otherwise the mold will still continue to spread and even affect the new installation. So I think, again,
this is the Mark thing. Mark goes into what it does. Yeah. So
yeah. All right. Yeah. So pretty basic. It really depends on the amount of presence of mold. So there's two major issues really for us. The first is my occupational health and safety obligations. For my guys, look, we do wear P3 masks, which are the best we can do given the circumstances. So our guys do kit up properly. The problem is, unfortunately, they don't always succeed in preventing spores and that, or the smell really, from affecting them. My guys tend to get headaches and things like that while in the underfloor, which is not ideal. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, as well, as we do not want to drag the insulation through the mold and then potentially take that insulation and install it to your substructure. So to do that, obviously could, spread the mold obviously through your underfloor, or it could, as I said, put it straight into your flooring, which is not an ideal scenario either. So in that circumstance, my guys sort of do it on the day. Unfortunately, our sales guys our quoters who do go out don't always catch it, unfortunately. Sometimes it actually happens, the mold develops between our guys going out and quoting and our guys coming out and installing, depending on lead times and things like that. You can generally smell it. It's just that musty smell that you sort of get, like off food and things like that. It's a very, very similar smell. Generally what happens then is that our guys sort of say, nope, sorry, can't do it today. We need to get that treated. I generally have a list, at least in Metro Melbourne, we have a list of mold contractors. We don't use anybody ourselves. And as a courtesy, we send the mold contractor list out to the customer, and the customer then engages different quotes from different mold companies, and depending on who can answer them the first as well, because sometimes unfortunately, some customers have had to suffer a longer lead time than they probably would have preferred, trying to get someone out to treat it. So they use whatever chemicals and whatever it might be to do that. And then within 24 hours, usually we can come back in and reinstall. So that's sort of the process. It is the biggest problem that I've got with underfloors. It's the one that hits us the hardest the most. And as Felicia said, it's never fun for us to walk away from the job. Because at the end of the day, I've got guys that, they've got to get paid, all the rest of it. It's not, not ideal in that situation. Of course, at the end of the day, we're not delivering
Not a profit
to the
day.
customer. Yeah.
It's not a profit day for us to walk away.
That's
it's
it.
no
So,
engineering stuff.
yeah. So making sure, obviously, we want to deliver at the end of the day too, is deliver for the customer as well, which is never ideal when we can't do that. So.
Yeah. Can be tricky, and yeah, the hard thing is with mold, often you might not see it, or some people might not even smell it, but there might actually be a lot inside the walls, inside the roof space, underneath the house.
Yeah. It's mainly underfloors. They're our biggest one. I don't think we've maybe only a couple of times. I've been with Enviroflex 2 years now, and I think we've encountered mold in the ceiling once in the roof space in that time. So, and we're doing 20 odd jobs a week, 20 odd houses a week plus. And yeah, as I said, it's mainly the underfloors is the biggest mold issue, because there's no ventilation, things like that people have under there. So yeah.
But then, as the picture here says, but then we have the really bad, the asbestos. So,
yeah, that's the other one. Not as bad as what you might think. Asbestos usually found in the ceiling, sometimes in the underfloors as well. Usually it's just because someone's just thrown it up there, either not knowing what it was or can't be bothered dealing with it. It really depends on the state of the asbestos. If there's two different types of asbestos you sort of need to worry about. There's friable and non-friable. Non-friable is a complete piece of asbestos. It's not broken. It's not damaged. That's relatively safe. You just move it out the way. It's fine. I've handled it myself, in my own in my own time. So the one that we do need to worry about is, as you can see on the photo there, is the friable asbestos, because as you can see, it's broken and thus it's fibrous, and which can get, if it's kicked up, it can get into the air. Then not exposing my guys to it, but potentially also obviously those fibers falling onto their clothing, and of course they've just come through the manhole in your bathroom, and they've got to track all the way back out through your bathroom, through your front door potentially as well. So obviously that's not ideal for the customer. Generally, again, we leave it to the guys on site. If they can work around it, they can. If not, what we normally do is every time we will inform the customer, and the customers feel free to get a licensed contractor to come in and remove the asbestos before we can deal with that section of the roof, or if it's prevalent throughout the space, get the entire area done as well. So that's the other encounter we have. Yeah.
That's good. So, what can people do? Let's say people want to avoid you coming in and then needing to go again. How can, people identify where asbestos is, or, what strategies should they do to, or who to talk with?
So one in 3 homes in Victoria has asbestos. As I said, what you're looking for is the friable stuff. Unless you've gone through a proper asbestos awareness course, it's kind of hard to tell. And even then, the rules around it generally is you have to get it properly identified in a lab. Although, having said that, obviously always erring on the side of caution is a good idea, I think, in this case. What I tend to look for is, I call it the golf ball pattern. So usually on the backing of it, there is like a dimpling, and that usually indicates it's asbestos. There's the old builder's trick of trying to light it on fire, and if it doesn't light on fire, it's asbestos. I don't recommend doing that. So there is.
No, it used to pop. My dad was a builder, Mark. My dad was a builder. We used to put it in his incinerator.
That's right.
Asbestos pops.
Yeah, so it's just if it looks like asbestos, we try and treat it. Now, you can actually handle it yourself. So if you actually work out, at least in Victoria, there is some guidance around handling it yourself as well, with a certain square meterage or a certain amount of exposure time per week and all this sort of stuff. It's a bit detailed. So look, I don't think it's worth carrying on like it's a scary monster unless you're actually going to drill through it or to destroy it. Then it's going to be a problem. And I'd be more concerned about the blue asbestos, which is the most dangerous stuff, and that's generally found in commercial properties anyway, as a general sort of rule of thumb. So from that perspective, yeah, look, if you do see something that looks almost like a thin plastery type substance with a and it's a hard backing on it, and generally, as I said, that if you look for that dimpling, or if it's, and generally you'll find it as well, decommissioned flues and things like that, or decommissioned chimneys, things like that up in the roof space, you'll generally find they'll be coated in this greyish sort of substance, which is generally asbestos itself. So, but it's not as big a problem as what you'd otherwise think it would be, unless you're in Canberra and got Mr. Fluffy blowing insulation. There's at least 1,000 homes up that way, unfortunately, who's copped that. They're all, I think they're slowly being demolished. But yeah, otherwise that didn't really appear down here. So generally not as big an issue. So, but it's solvable. That's the important thing. It's not a cheap exercise to fix, but it is fixable, and it without posing an unnecessary danger to yourself anyway.
That's good. And then let's talk about this project a little bit. Can you tell us a bit about this project and what's going these photos and how you deal with that?
Yeah, so from the electrical check, the wiring and that. It's a hard one. So we mandate that we get so as part of the Australian 3999 standards, we're supposed to get a electrical inspection done prior to either overlaying, removing, or installing new insulation. Obviously, wiring can be quite old, especially in older houses, things like that. We've brought that in more so a little bit more recently as a mandated thing. It's a matter of trying to obviously getting electricians and things like that. So we've got a number of subcontractors that we engage. Otherwise, if the customer is willing to provide a certificate of electrical safety dated within the last 12 months, so you feel free to engage your own electrician in this case. The reason why we do that, so you can see in the images there, obviously the wiring can be really, really patchy. It can be old if it's not current TPS cable. It may have deteriorated over time, especially if it's been in contact with polystyrene. Polystyrene tends to leach some of the chemicals out of TPS cable, the plasticizers. Makes it go brittle. Obviously uncovered wires, things like that. And of course, what we're going to be doing as well is we're going to potentially be covering some of that wiring with insulation, and it's already got insulation around it. And of course, wire has resistance, and that resistance can result in heat. And of course, heat build up over time can result in problems. So for peace of mind, the other issue as well, actually, you can see it in that photo there. You can see pieces of foil that is lying on that ceiling space. So that's also a danger as well. So one thing that happened during the home insulation scheme in some cases was they were putting foil as an insulation on people's ceilings. Now, if you've got an exposed wire touching that foil, that's now a massive electrical hazard. Your entire ceiling could be electrified, essentially, if it were to worst case scenario. So getting that removed is very, very important. And getting any wiring sort of fixed up, moved out the way. If it can be laid on top of the bats, it's fine. We can run wire between two layers of insulation for about 400 millimeters according to the rules. Otherwise, as long as the wiring is in touch with either the timber or the plaster, it can be covered. And that's the main thing that we sort of look for in terms of hazards is that sort of stuff, and preferably also upgrading your lighting. If you can upgrade your downlights to IC4, which can be covered with insulation, number one, and number two as well. The old style halogen downlights are a bit of a penetration in your roof. So we've got to give 100 mil. So this goes back to the gaps thing I mentioned earlier. We're supposed to give about 100 millimeters worth of space between electrical components such as lighting, which can't be in contact with the insulation. We've got to give it 100 mil. So you've got a 100 mil gap around every halogen downlight. So you think about that, how many downlights you might have, and getting them upgraded to an IC4 downlight, which is a relatively easy replacement for an electrician. They could just get that done, and we can cover that properly with insulation as well, which removes those gaps of any.
Having said that, if you don't want to do that, what we have is rock wool covers that actually go over the top of it. So, right. And I'm sure, yeah. So, but going back, so one of the big things about and I know we're going to head into DIY in a minute, but you can't have insulation. You can't have wiring insulated on both sides. So if you've got wires that are sitting on plasterboard, electrical cables on plasterboard, that's fine. You stick insulation, over the top kind of thing, that's fine. But what we do is we move them to the sides. They're all stapled to the sides, and it removes any kind of issues. Mark? You're
Yeah,
looking
correct.
your
No,
frown.
100%. We've got, as I said, as per the rules, it's about 400, no more than 400 millimeters between two layers of, which is usually fine because usually the wiring's loose anyway. We just hit them on top of the bats, so it's usually not an issue. But making sure you do find, we have actually had since instituting, we've had a number of people actually where we haven't been able to go ahead because our electricians did spot issues in the roof space. So it's lucky we did actually end up spotting them anyway. So you'll find, junction boxes not fitted off properly, things like that. So.
And I hate to say it, and I'm going to give everyone hopefully a little bit of a chuckle. There is a lot of people who have extra wiring coming, extra power coming in off the grid kind of thing. So, Mark, what's the term we use for that? Oh, is it stealing from the grid? There's a couple of people.
Stealing from the grid, or
You might not know.
The old
This is
hydroponic
happening.
setup, the old hydroponic setup.
Yeah,
Local.
the hydroponic setup.
From your
Maybe
local.
just jumping in, I realized we're a bit over. There were lots of questions, but maybe
Oh,
one
sorry.
that was quite interesting, and that's the right slide here. People are asking about the different insulation types, and we have the slide here, so that's perfect. But in terms of their merits, in terms of sustainability, or even recycled content and circularity, or what is your advice on that?
As I said, it sort of depends on what your setup is at your house. There's probably about half a dozen different ways of doing each particular envelope in some cases. Our go-to one is glass wool. That's just what it is. We're a pink bats house, which are Australian made pink bats. So we take great pride in trying to support Australian manufacturing where possible. Polyester is also manufactured in Australia as well, which is good. And generally cellulose fibers as well. So and the expandable polystyrene. There's a few customers. It's a few manufacturers here in Australia. So that's one good thing, which is we've got a lot of manufacturers here that can do that. Generally in your ceilings, you're looking at either polyester or glass wool or natural wool as well. They're the most common. Really depends on your price point, depending on things like itchiness. Obviously, glass wool. So your pink bats, your earth wool, your eco wool, your Bradford gold bats, things like that are all made of glass wool. They are all
talking about price point as well. So what would be then kind of the entry one, and what would be the
entry one? Definitely glass wool.
Yes.
Generally, that's the most entry point. That's where you're going to get, and you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Polyester is going to be a little bit more expensive. The main problem with polyester mainly is the way that it's packaged, and the square meterage coverage per pack that tends to blow out and it's also very limited in the R values that you can get. So the R values you can get so you can get an R6 pink, an R6 glass wool bat, but you can't get an R6 polyester bat. You've got a double lay. So, and generally I think the lowest R value they're generally producing now is about 3.5. So you're going to get one layer of 3.5 and then 3.5, which is going to give you an R7 effectively. But yeah, that's based on your price points. Is glass wool is going to be your most entry level go-to for most people.
Yeah.
But Simone, I've got to say, so I'm really fortunate to move in the world of people who are developing new products, and and what we're seeing is some fantastic new natural wool bats coming through, and they're going through a process of setting up a factory in Australia, and hopefully I'll be back with you in 3 months' time. We'll be talking about this. It's all made out of fully recycled product, right?
I've heard it a lot, so I've been waiting patiently, or not so patiently, to have it available.
Oh, look, an amazing company, and obviously, as Mark said, we support Australian manufacturing wherever we can, and and this is awesome. But I also mixed with another company who is talking about taking things that come out of your yellow recycling bins, and they've actually done a prototype over in Belgium, where they're creating a bat that is fantastic also. And, I can't wait to bring this to this forum.
Yeah, awesome. I think there's a lot actually moving in the space of the insulation materials. I've recently even talked with someone who is recycling expandable polystyrene. And we know that this is definitely not the environmentally friendliest material choice, because it is breaking up in these million bits and pieces, and it's not like going away anywhere. So to have actually something, for example, which you can keep within the material flows and tapping into circular economy opportunities is at least repurposing the material and not adding constantly virgin materials into that flow. So it's an evolving sector, and I think we will hear most likely more over the next month, in particular from Enviroflex and others, on new materials. Hemp is also a very highly discussed topic in that space, and we have also wood fiber and so on. So I think there's heaps actually, and it's good because there are various needs, and in particular when you're looking into retrofitting, they are not like, you can't do everything. So you're often enough limited. And I think in particular, the experience on Enviroflex side to serve that specific sector with a whole lot of tricky spaces. You know, for example, the wall insulation, how do you call it again?
Retrofit.
Yeah.
Call it environable, yeah.
So
So
I
as a
guess
result, we're product agnostic. Sorry, we're company agnostic. So we choose the best product for every kind of scenario, and we offer good best models. So, you know, depending on what your budget is, you know, you might love to have, for example, natural wall, but that might be beyond your price point. So, or conversely, you know, either which way. So, but look,
absolutely, and I totally agree with Mark's sentiment in the beginning. You know, if you start, you know, and you're doing something in like adding actually insulation, that's definitely better than no insulation. So you can start always, and it immediately creates so many benefits and co-benefits out of it. So definitely do it, even if you tap into that first segment, because you might not have the huge budget. Because we are a bit over time and just conscious of the time, should we and I want also just quickly to jump into the logbook, but we have a couple of questions, and Simona, maybe you can run through the questions.
Anna, that was kind of the main question. I mean, there were a few other questions, but I think what Danny had said already, there was one question that was a bit specific, so probably rather book a time with me. That would be a bit too long today.
I could have a speed round at trying to answer them all, if you like.
Yeah, I think we will definitely add the questions, if everyone is okay with that, even under the event page, so that it can be revisited ongoing. But I think that's a great way also to answer. There's one particular, is there an equivalent like Enviroflex company in Sydney? So are you serving New South Wales?
Sorry, Enviroflex is in Sydney, and Enviroflex is in southern New South Wales. Enviroflex is in ACT.
Yeah.
Enviroflex is in eastern South Australia, and Enviroflex is on the march. So,
Yeah,
unstoppable.
So we are everywhere. And if you're asking me who I recommend in Sydney, quite frankly, central Sydney, I recommend Four Seasons. And all I can say to you is Jade and her people are beyond reproach, and they're amazing. And I highly encourage you to use them.
Yeah, Felicia, feel free also to maybe add some contact details or the link to the website under the event page.
Now, sorry, and please, that's not me putting down any other company. This is just one that I know.
Yeah, that's fine. So maybe to recap, why we have also Enviroflex as a company, as a trusted company, actually on Evitat. So Evitat was born also from that idea, really to allow trust and transparency to be the guiding beacon in decision making. And Felicia and I, we had lots of talks and really informing also ourselves actually of the service quality, the embedded, also I would say that big task actually to create really a great setup and work environment locally, and really to support that economy to have something to grow within, not just to think of we will just import and outsource everything. So it is really embedded in that ingrained thinking around how do we make this sector actually bigger, and because we need those kind of solutions, and we need companies who are thinking deeply about their own staff, how to support each other, even during difficult times, and like COVID, for example. And I think the way how Enviroflex has handled a lot of things during these difficult times just speaks for themselves. So Enviroflex is a responsible member on Evitat, and just maybe to give you an idea, if you engage actually with Enviroflex, give me just a second.
It's very kind of you, Sonia, to talk about it this way, because obviously it's been tricky times during COVID, and then coming out in the recession that we're now in, despite the fact that the economists refuse to sitting there and saying, oh no, it's not quite a recession. It really is. So look, we really appreciate your support.
Yeah, look, I think when you are at the point and you can make a decision, to go ahead and sign on a company, at least that was for us, for example, during our renovation journey, also a decision point that we wanted actually to make a more conscious choice to support a local company who is really embedded and in providing good work environments. And I think this is a really critical part. We often lose track a little bit of the overall global trade and having ordering from everywhere. But I think it's really critical to also understand there are companies who really invest in their people, train them, skill them up, and really deliver exceptional service quality. So that's exactly it.
Sonia, I just want to add, sorry, and I'm interrupting, I know, but just on what you said, I just want everyone to understand that I have a relationship with Sonia and Evitat, and as does Enviroflex. We haven't insulated with Sonia.
No.
And
Exactly.
so there's no conflict of interest here.
No, exactly.
And indeed, we have insulated for many, many people in the government and many, many think tank people, and they've all paid, and there's never been a conflict of interest. So,
a good point, actually.
So just the way you said it, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no worries. Just to maybe even say it again, everyone who is onboarding into Evitat is going through a vetting process. And that is really about making trust and transparency work. So from product information to service quality, all of that gets really displayed and talked about transparently. So it's a really critical part of the Evitat platform, because we want to support conscious decision making, and if we can make these decisions to support local businesses, even better. other than that, it's the priority, of course, to create climate-ready homes and really to support, to transform renovation choices into climate decisions. So, for example, if you would go ahead with EnviroFlex, you have actually the opportunity to create a logbook for your home. And this is just an example of our rental property here in Melbourne. But I've played around a little bit just to show you what it does. So you can actually add insulation, and you can, like we have curated a little bit the questions so that we also get feedback on to which degree, for example, insulation has improved that comfort level in your home. Which Simona, you agree probably. It was a lot of discussion. How can we capture the comfort of homes? And so we reverse engineered a little bit these questions. And this is just the start. We will be rolling out a lot of new features, and in particular in the next couple of months, there will be the feature also to upload, for example, your invoices prior that we have even existed. So, for example, if you have engaged EnviroFlex a couple of years ago, you can upload that and add that to your home's logbook and to the repository. What it creates over time is actually an information set about the performance of your home. It tracks also the environmental impact. And with that, we will also work on adding that as a value around property, because it's not just the location of your property. If you are investing significantly to improve, for example, the comfort, the thermal efficiency, these are things you usually can't see. So it's quite important actually to convert that and demonstrate that. And in particular, when you're thinking about the point when you are selling your property, you can attach that as simple as that to your property listing. All of these, for example, installed and even the certificate will be then also stored in assets and can be accessed at any point. So because this is basically an example of our rental property here in Melbourne, I didn't actually go ahead and install any invoices. But if it would be our home, for example, in Queensland, I could do exactly that. And it would really create all that information history and also guide you during renovation processes. We have, for example, also a feature which is called goal settings. And that was developed with experts like Simona and others from sustainable architecture and circular industry. So it really guides you through a set of questions to frame better your goals and aspirations. And then you can share that. It might be even with family members or with your professional, like an architect, your builder, to make sure that the things you care most about, maybe your health concerns or aspects like affordability, comfort, that they get prioritized and don't get removed down the track because so many other things are important during a renovation process. So this is all really in place to help you, to guide you through the process. And like I said, we have also the community sector. In community, we run these webinars like this one today, and feel free really to ask questions. I can show you this one here. So all the questions we have from today will be displayed underneath as well. And you can tag even Felicia or Mark in here as well. And I'm pretty sure they are more than happy to jump in and give you some answers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Please, yeah,
Well,
please
we are a
reach
little bit
out.
over time.
Anyone has any
Sorry?
questions? Anyone has any questions, please just reach out. our contact details are there. Please reach out to our company. My company's awesome, quite frankly. My guys are fantastic. And, Prudence has said about Nikki, but you can see Mark. And, these guys, they're fantastic.
Prudence, special thank you for sharing your story with us today. And I'm very, very keen to welcome you back and hear actually the full 12 months experience and what it actually created in terms of comfort level and even energy efficiency. So we will reach out to you when we reach the August kind of date.
We'll make it a date, but it's time I finished with you now. So thank you very much indeed, and best of luck to you.
Thank you,
Prudence,
everyone.
thank you so much. Prudence,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Great pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Enjoy the evening and see you soon. Thank
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.